there's this club, this group of super close friends, those four guys as sort of the center of it. There are a few others who are friends for 50 years and co-invested, co-managed, played bridge, played golf, played well, got together with their families and all that stuff. So I'd say Sandy was one of Warren's very closest friends. He was an original partner with Munger and Buffett in what started out as Berkshire, and so Sandy became a very substantial stockholder of Berkshire back in the mid 70s, and it was about 2%, maybe 3% of Berkshire, and held it the whole time. He died owning that big stake of stock. And about 2000, Warren asked Sandy to join the board of Berkshire, and so he's been a director there for 20 years. He was a good friend of mine too. He was part of the way I was introduced to Warren in the first place, way back 30 years ago. He was the chairman of the university I was teaching at, and he was just a wonderful friend to me in getting the essays published, in getting insight into the investment philosophy. He offered me a job once at First Manhattan, which is the fund that he ran. He introduced my wife to his wife, who helped my wife get on a important board. Sandy was just a first-class guy, and we dedicated it to Sandy. He passed away last year, or maybe it's 2 years already. And it's funny with Warren. He says he shuns testimonials. He doesn't make dedications or honoraria, very often. And so I wasn't sure when I proposed the idea what he'd say, but he jumped at the idea. So this is absolutely a great idea. It's almost as if he was going to think of it himself. So it's a nice tribute, and it's worth a read. I won't read everything that Warren said, but he hits the nail on the head about the relationship that he had with Sandy.
And Warren's often said that the essays reflect his thinking, Berkshire's thinking exactly. And we mentioned before that there was a kind of risk that when you just read through annual letters, you get a kind of selection bias because you remember one idea, from that particular year, say 1985, and you don't connect it to everything else he said on the same subject at different time points.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alex. We did that right from the beginning. We first published this collection at a symposium, at a gathering of 20 intellectuals to debate the ideas, and so from that moment we wanted it to be a comprehensive, digestible, integrated account of the philosophy, so people couldn't just pick and choose. Oh, well, here you said this, and then run down a critique on that. That the participants had to evaluate the entire context. And I think that's one of the reasons Warren liked it so much, and why readers value it so much. And as you suggest, we update it every 5 or so years, not because his thinking has changed radically, but it evolves, and especially as the world changes, the application of the durable principles alters a little bit, and so it's valuable to see the arc of his thinking on any given topic, whether it's dividends, corporate philanthropy, governance, accounting, what have you. So it's valuable to, and this is for anybody. A lot of people are taken out of context and quotes are rendered, but the full philosophy is only possible when you see those quotes in context and over time, and that's, I think, why Warren appreciated this collection so much.
And it's something where you really do get value out of the most recent edition, because then you've got everything, as it were. It's a necessary software update.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. I think that's exactly right. I mean, it was actually his idea when I did the conference symposium. I didn't expect any kind of legs. It's been an extraordinarily successful book, but I did it for my conference. I was running a corporate governance program, and it was a big conference of the year I did that year. And he was there at the conference, and just in the course of chatting, he said, "Well, Larry, you should update this every 5 years or so." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's what we've done, and it does, so it's accreted in size. Again, I try to keep it, digestible, but the spine trim is 50% greater, I guess. And so, and you see, each new edition has a slightly updated and improved, perhaps, valence, philosophical orientation. Again, the fundamentals are durable; they remain the same, but how they applied, whether it was during the dot-com bubble in the very beginning of the book, 2000-ish, to the '08 crisis and ensuing Great Recession, the housing problems, all the way through recent convulsions, pandemics, wars, political debate, the ESG, and all the rest. It is really neat to track the philosophy over time.
Well, it seems a lot of investors have a core philosophy which stays similar over time. Would you say that also applies to Warren?
Yeah, for sure. I think I would encapsulate it as the book does, is the key insight that he's always operated under is that in any market there is a difference between price and value. Price is what you pay, value is what you get, and that happens throughout the economy, throughout life. And when it comes to investing, the revelation, the epitome of that gap is stock picking. Stock prices over long periods of time are probably a pretty darn good estimate of the intrinsic value, but they vacillate quite a bit. So that at any given time, the price of a stock may be way higher than its intrinsic value or way lower. And so that key insight defines his traditional investment philosophy. And so he's famous for finding that low-priced value stock. And then he has applied that insight also in the acquisition of 100% of businesses, where for various reasons he is positioned to pay a price that's not necessarily full value from his point of view, in part because he offers a lot of intangible economic value to the sellers. So that principle radiates his philosophy. That's why people call him a value investor. He doesn't particularly embrace that label, but he says that's investing. That's all. So it's redundant to say it's value investing. He doesn't believe in momentum investing or growth investing, or chart investing or index investing. Those are not the activities he associates with this discipline of value investing. And obviously radiating out from that theme are important tasks for the investors, such as conducting fundamental business analysis, studying the intrinsic value of the business, not really paying so much attention to the valuation estimates of the market, except insofar as you determine whether it's an attractive price or not, but conducting a hard-headed, independent, fundamental business valuation. That's at the heart of his philosophy and his approach. And a lot of what you see in the essays are meditations on that outlook, on that activity.
Approaching it from that perspective, many things seem to make sense. So, for instance, having your own estimate of value seems to be connected with being willing to defer from conventional thinking. For instance, in terms of ESG, or as we'll come on to in terms of corporate governance.
Oh, for sure. It's interesting. That whole first chapter in the book, or as we call it, part one, it's got maybe 10 chapters under it. The topics include corporate purpose, employees and business change, society and social compacts, risk, reputation, and climate change. And he also addresses in that section executive compensation, boards, shareholders, disclosure, all those topics. He's been discussing those topics in various various riffs for 50 years. And he's been saying similar things about them for 50 years. And those things include how important it is to cater to the interests of your customers, to protect the safety and the prosperity of your employees, to look out for negative externalities that a company may produce with harmful effects on on communities, such as through workforce reductions or, plant closures, and concerns about climate emissions and resulting atmospheric change. Warren's been talking about this thing for 50 years, and that first section of the book begins with a synthesized explanation of his views, his philosophy on these topics. And in this way, what he's talking about is very old-fashioned, very conventional. What's happened, however, in the world is a whole movement begun by the United Nations, championed by the indexing community and institutional asset managers, has taken this concept of ESG to a sort of hijacked level. It's doing something very different, starting with some very attractive principles that Warren has stated for decades, and that sort of spinning them for parochial purposes. But I think it's a refreshing read for anyone who's been just an ordinary observer or an active participant in the ESG debates to have a look at Warren Buffett on these topics, and it's quite refreshing, and a perspective that is too little heard in the current din of debate